The president cast it as one of his signature achievements, getting the United States out of Iraq. So after launching airstrikes against the ISIS terrorists, Obama took questions from reporters yesterday to emphasize the limits of his decision.
How do you assure the American people that we're not getting dragged into another war in Iraq?
I've been very clear that we're not going to have U.S. combat troops in Iraq again. We are going to maintain that because we should have learned a lesson from our long and immensely costly incursion in Iraq.
But has this triggered the same familiar media debate about the U.S. again becoming enmeshed in the bloody strife in Iraq?
If you're going to get in big and get in decisively now. If you go in incrementally in this way, you don't have the effect you want to have on ISIS.
Personally, I think that these airstrikes are going to lead to no good. In 24 hours, we have gone from they are going to be limited airstrikes to there is no end date to these airstrikes.
Joining us now to examine the media's coverage in Minneapolis, Lauren Ashburn, Fox News contributor who hosts Social Buzz on the Fox website. In New York, Amy Holmes, who anchors the Hot List at The Blaze. And here in Los Angeles, Leslie Marshall, radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Lauren Ashburn, how have Obama and his team shaped the media narrative here?
Well, President Obama basically gave an interview to Thomas Friedman of the New York Times where he said, outlining his Iraq policy, other foreign policy. They chunked that up and put that on the New York Times website. Then, meanwhile, the White House aides briefed reporters on background, and a lot of what we call in the business TikTok stories came out in the New York Times and the Washington Post and in Politico as well. And so what they're doing right now is they are trying to canvass everybody, get all of the word out, and that is good for the media. That is good for the public. They should have been doing this a long time ago.
What I love is the identical details that come out in these background discussions, like Joint Chiefs Chairman Dempsey getting in the limo with Obama. The president was late for his Georgetown dinner with Michelle, and details like that. Amy
Remarkably
Holmes,
similar. Imagine how that happens.
Are the media hawks, Amy, who are filling the airwaves now and saying Obama's doing too little and too late, are they in any way out of touch with public opinion that is very wary in a war-weary country of getting further enmeshed once again in the battles in Iraq?
Well, you saw that opinion expressed in the Washington Post on the editorial page. But Howie, if you listen to the clip that you just played of how the question was framed to the president, how do you reassure the American people that we're not getting dragged into another war? I mean, that's a pretty loaded question coming from the point of view of Iraq war weariness, not national security. How do you reassure the people that you will be defeating ISIS decisively? And as Dianne Feinstein warned on Friday, keeping those terrorists from arriving back on American soil. I think the media has also buried the fact, I mentioned Dianne Feinstein, senator from California and chair of the Intelligence Committee, basically giving the president a very hard slap on Friday about his approach to Iraq and ISIS, and you're not seeing the media reporting on that. In fact, Democrats have been harder on this president than the national media.
But Leslie Marshall, why is it a loaded question? This was only one of several that was asked of the president yesterday when he did that presser on the lawn in front of the helicopter. Why is it loaded to say, how long is this going to go on? What's the mission here? How do you define success? How do you assure the American people? Because the president keeps bringing that up, that this is not the start of another phase of the Iraq war.
Well, I think when the president stands up to speak, as he did yesterday, in addition to Dionne Warwick and her song Deja Vu, or Here We Go Again, playing in the background, that clearly is what is on the mind of every American, regardless of what their political ideology is. It also is problematic for the president. I mean, this is a man who was against Iraq. This is a man who brought the troops home from Iraq. This is a man who talks about the cost, and we're not just talking about finances and dollars. We're talking about human lives and the toll that it took. And this is also a man who talks about the fact that Iraq needs to take care of its own security issues with regard to ISIS, and that's the end goal. And the American people do need to be assured. But it's a loaded question because this is an issue that is loaded with emotion. And that's a difficult place for a president to be in because he has to teeter what's best for national national security, and he also has to reassure the American public, which I think the question was excellent to ask, because that's where Americans' minds are at, and that's transparency.
I will say, Amy, that the mainstream media, I think, have been slow until the last few days to pick up or give much attention to the threat, the genocidal threat toward Christians in Iraq being carried out by these ISIS terrorists, and the conservative media have been warning about this for some time.
Absolutely, and you can see on websites very graphic images of ISIS, their rampage across Iraq, including even beheading children. But this goes all the way back to the 2012 election when when President Obama was boasting that Al-Qaeda was on the run. The media accepted that uncritically, did not take that claim apart. That was always bogus. Al-Nusra was already through North Africa with attacks, including on Benghazi. What we saw was that Al-Qaeda was actually splintering and setting up franchises all across the Middle East. And President Obama's claim, his campaign claim, the media, as I say, accepted uncritically. So while it comes as no surprise to conservatives that we are where we are, apparently the liberal media is just waking up to it.
Leslie?
Well, I don't agree that the liberal media are waking up to it. But I would agree that they're being harder on the president about it. I have to say that, and I have to give credit, not just because I'm a contributor here, that Fox News has done an excellent job of talking about which could be a religious genocide. And with my background being half Jewish and looking back to the Holocaust, you can't ignore such an issue. But I don't agree that this is too late by the liberal media or not enough. I think quite frankly, it's almost like a dance, and they're following the president's lead, and of course criticized on both sides for always they feel delaying, when I feel this is a president who just thinks before he reacts.
Lauren, what about the broader media strategy that I mentioned at the top? Has President Obama finally decided he loves the White House press corps?
I think love is a bit strong, and I think even like is a bit strong. I think he's just tolerating the press corps. Listen, he made a huge mistake by not giving access to the press corps, and he has finally realized that, and that is what we're seeing right now. And he has had a terrible year and admitted early on that he had disdain for reporters and didn't want to give interviews. And now that he is, I think he's seeing some better headlines than he had been in the past.
What a difference.
Well, he certainly talked to the he certainly talked to the likes of Ellen DeGeneres and Zach Galifianakis and some of the big anchors, but the beat reporters are always getting shut out. I'm wondering, Lauren, are the reporters being aggressive now that they have this newfound access? President taking questions about 6 times in the last 3 weeks.
It's actually quite the opposite, because now they have the ability, knowing that they're going to get more access to the president than just once every 3 months or 6 months. They have the ability now to ask him more thoughtful questions. They don't have to ask about the polls and the politics and the scandal of the week. They can really drill down, and that gives Obama the opportunity to answer more substantively than he has been.
Amy, this is a guy who doesn't like being told what to do by the pundits. Go to the border, hold fewer fundraisers, don't play golf. So is he maybe calculating that the likes of Ed Henry and Jonathan Karl and Major Garrett and Chuck Todd are going to give him a fairer hearing than the more opinionated types?
Well, he doesn't like to do what members of his own party, Henry Cuellar from Texas, said, that he should go down to the border. But what a difference a 42% approval makes, that the president realizes that he does need to address the public, and this way, through the media. But even these pieces on Iraq, as you pointed out, so many of the same details, basically the White House spoon-feeding the story to the media, and the media just sort of accepting it again uncritically.
Well, you are certainly aware, Amy. You are certainly aware, Amy, that every administration does background briefings and tries to spoon-feed details that the press. This is not unique to the Barack Obama administration.
No, and that's not a criticism of the administration. In fact, it's brilliant. They're getting exactly what they want. It's a criticism of the media that is taking this uncritically. I mean, Leslie just said that the media is in a dance with the president, and the president is leading. That's not the posture or position that the national mainstream media is supposed to be in. They're supposed to be looking at the president's claims critically.
I think that we're getting a lot more information, Amy, out of the White House than we have been in the past. And if the president is leading the dance, it's about time. He'd been following before, and reporters were harassing him and trying to get any kind of information out. Now
I would hardly call the media's treatment of President Obama harassment.
As a substantial We have substantial points of view and questions that happen. I mean, I think, yes, they were. Jonathan Karl went at the president.
As
Ed
he
Henry
should. He's
has
a reporter. That's his job.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly right.
But I
Well,
wouldn't
certainly
say that
there
the
have been
media has been
loud
harassing the president.
Certainly there have been loud complaints about the lack of access. Let me get Leslie in our final half minute. Your side seems to be depressed or something. I mean, you have Maureen Dowd of the New York Times writing the other day that Obama is whining, he's slacking off, he's coasting into irrelevance.
Well, I have to tell you, and I wanted to jump in on not the cat fight, but look, historically, presidents have had a love-hate relationship with the media. George Washington canceled over a dozen subscriptions to newspapers when he didn't like what they said. And I honestly, as a Democrat, I am about time, Mr. President, about time. Use the media, because presidents have shown historically they can also use it very successfully. But I also have to say, when you have a president with a low approval rating, when you have a midterm election, and you have a Senate that could be flipped to Republican charge, Democrats, what are you doing? You need to report the facts, but you need to back your guy.
Let me get a break here.